when I closed the stores, the web business just shot up.
Oh,
So
wow.
for the first 3 or 4 months in 2016, like my web sales, I was doing like $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 a month without spending a penny.
It's the Doscinco Project.
Money pouring in, clientele growing down.
With your host, Doscinco.
Let's go!
What up, everybody? You are now tuned into the Doscinco Project, where we talk about business, finance, motivation, and mindset. If you want to learn more about the clothing industry today, you are in for a treat. We have the owner and founder of the clothing brand Duke and Winston, featured on Fox Business, ABC, Black Enterprise Magazine, Philadelphia Magazine, and the list goes on and on. He started this brand in 2008 with many lessons learned along the way. Please give it up for Seun Olubodun. All right, Seun, first and foremost, prior to starting Duke and Winston, where were you going career-wise? What were you doing?
So I had a web design company that I started in college, student at Temple. And it was, really small. It was just me, a couple of freelance people. And I was making websites for like restaurants and, bars and just little small businesses around Center City. Just walk around. This is way back in the day. So, put flyers and like restaurants and get business that way. And so I was doing that for about 3 years. And another friend of mine had a business where they were doing a lot of print stuff for nonprofits, small businesses around Philly. There's a company called Fresh Out Media. And so we kind of like combined, believe maybe 2006, 2007. And my job was to do client services. So my job was to go out and get clients. I wasn't really a great web designer. So when we combined, they had like a team of people. Small business, maybe about 6 of us in Old City. And I was doing that, traveling around, just looking for clients to bring on.
Okay, nice. So what made you begin this particular clothing brand, Duke and Winston?
The way that I'm wired, even with starting my web design company, I was a junior in college. I just like doing things on my own. I really don't have the type of structure I think that's like required for corporate or to work for other people. I've always tried to start something since probably I was like 15 was when I started like my first like idea. None of them really turned into anything, but that's just how I'm wired. And I'm always just looking out for things. So with Duke and Winston, I was up in Boston and there was a brand up there called Johnny Cupcakes, and it's a really well-known clothing brand. His logo is a cupcake, and he's got these like ice cream trucks, and instead of selling ice cream, they sell t-shirts. Right. And then the stores look like bakeries, and when you open the ovens up, there's t-shirts in there, and it's a really cool brand. And the day I was up there, actually I was trying to see if I could get them as a client for Fresh Out. And I got there and there was like 200 people lined up outside, and this was like a thing that happened a lot. He would put out a shirt and people would line up, and they would like, it was almost like how Supreme is now. They would line up for days. And my initial thought was like, there's nothing like this in Philly at all. Like Ubik is was kind of like the independent Philly kind of brand, but there wasn't like a brand like that. And I come to find out that like most major cities have just these hometown brands that people really, really love. And so that was the idea. I just instantly, once I saw that, I was like, I think I could do something like this. Like I have all my friends are in Philly. Like I know people that would gravitate towards a brand that was very like hyper local like that. And, that's kind of where the idea came from.
That's awesome. That's awesome. How did you come up with the name Duke and Winston, and how did you come up with the logo?
So, the name, I was just trying to think of anything. you know, and some of the names were not great. Like I was trying to go more streetwear with it. So, you know, it was like Cash and Cookies. I was just trying to come up with like, back then it was like all of these streetwear brands had names like that. So I was trying to think of just anything. Then luckily for me, I had a English bulldog at the time, Duke.
Okay.
And just sitting in my apartment, you know, and we're just looking at him, and I just was like, oh, Duke, that would putting the dog into the brand would be like a really cool concept. And I'm a really big dog person. I moved to Philly from the UK when I was like 12. So I had this kind of British kind of background, and I kind of, you know, was really into like British brands already. And so the name Duke and Winston just came because Winston Churchill, who was like the British Prime Minister in the 40s, his nickname was the British Bulldog. And, you know, and his family, they were like Dukes. And so I had my bulldog Duke, and it just clicked. I mean, I had a list, and I still have the list of just like 14 names, and that just kind of popped out. And, you know, initially the logo was Duke with a crown on, holding like the Queen's like staff. And, you know, the first 3 years of the brand, the logo was just really not great. You know, I just kind of switched it out. But luckily for me, you know, getting on in years, there was an ad agency in Philly that really just helped me. And it's funny, I didn't even think about it. They put the Winston Churchill's top hat on the dog, and then Winston Churchill's bow tie, because he's really known for like, you know, his always top hat and a bow tie. And then they put that together for me, and that's what eventually became the logo.
That's awesome. So you utilized an ad agency or an agency to help develop your logo. Did you use them for your product designs as well, for the t-shirts?
No.
Okay.
No. And they didn't come about till several years into the brand.
Gotcha.
So my initial logo was just something that I sketched out. It was the bulldog with the crown. And, you know, I guess I went to business school, but I'm definitely more creative. So like the ideas for the initial t-shirts and stuff, I'm like a researcher. So I'm just on the computer, just like looking at ideas of things that I thought would sell. In the brand early on wasn't very like geared towards what it is now, which is very like dog people friendly. I was just looking for like imagery. Again, this is back in the day of, you know, streetwear. So big British logos. Yeah, big streetwear, colorful shirts. My first graphic was actually, I had this Biggie Smalls poster where he's got the crown like to the side. Yep. So I took that and I replaced the big, you know, with the bulldog with the crown. It's still my best, you know, it's still, you know, 11 years later, it's still like my best selling shirt. I'm always trying to retire it because it's so different than everything, but right. Probably sold 10,000 of them. I don't know, a lot of them. Wow. And so that was my first graphic. Did it in a couple of colors, and that's what I kind of launched with.
Okay. Now those graphics that you put on your shirts now, do you copyright them? Do you trademark them so that way bigger brands don't maybe steal those designs? Like, how does that work?
So it's actually funny you say that, because I think that if you were talking to somebody else, they might tell you that you should. But the problem is, if you are a small brand and you don't have a lot of money, copyright and trademarking only help you. So like my logo is copyrighted, trademarked. I mean, tens of thousands of dollars to like trademark and copyright like every piece of the logo, you know. But the graphics. So for instance, I had a logo with it was like a Christmas version of my logo, and the Gap stole it. Like
the Gap
exactly, they stole it, put it on a t-shirt. I got 20, 30 customers sending me pictures, and they put it on a kid's tee. Pictures, thinking that Duke and Winston got picked up by Gap. And when I saw it, I was like, oh, wow. Like one of their designers stole the exact thing. So I had to get a lawyer, you know, I thought I was going to get paid, but they actually ended up just taking it they took it they took the shirt off out of the stores. If I had the money, I would have really, really gone further. But you get to a point, you're spending so much money with lawyers, it becomes difficult. So you can copyright and trademark everything. The problem is somebody could switch something really, really small, right? And then it's like, it's almost like not yours. It has to be so unique. Like if you, like, you know, artwork is one thing. You develop a piece of artwork, someone steals that, you can prove that you came up with it completely originally. You know, a bulldog with a top hat, it's mine, but somebody takes that top hat and they do something different with it. And they have, again, a lot more money and a lot of like lawyers, like lawyer fees just add up. So it becomes difficult. So I say that your brand, your logo, copyright, trademark that, your name if it's unique. The individual graphics, you know, if you're a $100 million company, I'm sure that you will trademark everything, but I think it's hard to protect.
Wow. So explain the time. So you were working for a marketing agency at one time, then you started this brand. What made you transition, or explain the process of you transitioning from working for someone to now becoming your own boss?
There wasn't a transition because I just quit. You know, like you know, I guess maybe we'll get into like mistakes in business, but once I had the idea, actually I don't think I quit. I just was thinking about it all the time, and so my job was to go out and get clients for the company, and I feel like my input just kind of dropped. You know, again, we were a small company. I wasn't making a lot of money, and I was just on the computer all day thinking about ideas. You know, I didn't have the money to start the brand, but I had a car. I had an Audi A6. Like it was like my baby. It was a 99. You know, it was a little older, but I put everything into it. So I had that, and I knew I was just gonna sell it. So I kind of looked at it and I was like, I need about $6,000 to really get this, to launch this brand. I have this car, you know, my job, I'm not really performing. So luckily the owner of the business we were friends. So we just kind of sat down, and I kind of was like, I'm going to go do this. No plan. I didn't give myself like a runway and collect a couple more paychecks. Like once I figured that I was going to do it, I just quit, sold the car, and that was it.
Man, talk about going all the way in, huh?
I went all in, yeah.
Now, if you can do it all over again, would you do it the same way, or would you strategize a plan so that way you have a smooth transition out?
So there's two ways of looking at it. Like I was, you know, when you're young and you're hungry and you're like, and back then, the way that I did it is like, makes a great story for like a book, because I just went like, you know, all the failures and the way that I did it, I learned so much, like, you know what I mean? Like you romanticize it a little bit, but it was it was a crazy way of doing it. I think the craziest people in business, they do things that way, right? Like I could look back and be like strategize and plan and whatever, but I didn't have a fashion background. For you to want to launch a fashion brand anyway, you kind of have to you have to make a move like that. You know, if you're a more structured person and you have one, you know, you of course have a plan, make sure you have the cash flow, make sure, and you know, talk about like mistakes and things I would have thought back on, find people that are in that industry and kind of like bring on a partner. You know, the fashion industry has a lot of moving parts, so make sure that you plan all of that. But if you're young and you have an idea, you know, I'm not going to tell anybody not to do it that way, because again, it wasn't like I was launching a business and I borrowed a bunch of money and I had a lot on the line. Like I had time to learn. So I kind of like the way I did it. But, you know, if I was going to give some advice, I'd say some planning probably would be good.
Gotcha. But if you're young and you don't have the responsibilities of children or a wife, or what have you, go all in if you can.
Go all in if you can. Especially now, there wasn't social media like it was back then. You've got so many tools. So, make sure, I say that the one thing is make sure that you have like if you're going to go all in, make sure that you have the financial in place that you can last a year, without making any money. So you need to make sure you have that.
Wow. Gotcha. Okay. So explain, so there was no social media back then. You have this brand. How did you market it? Did you go around selling the t-shirts? Did you set up a website? Like, what was your operation like?
Yeah. So, I'm a very face-to-face person. Even though I was like in my, early mid-20s, I also in technology, I'm not a big technology person. I'm big on face-to-face. So it worked out for me because when I also started Duke and Winston, the Piazza in Philadelphia had just opened up, took a big open space market. And so I just, I think I got like 50 shirts. I tried to make 100 shirts, 50 of them just didn't come out right. So I launched with about 50 shirts and I set up at the Piazza and I would sell. I sold the 50 shirts. Probably it was like a 2-day event, sold all 50 of them, reordered. The great thing about launching in Philly was everything was really, back then, 2008, 2009, was cheap. Trunk shows are cheap, rent is cheap. There's events especially in the spring and summer. You've got everything from the Rittenhouse Road Festival, the Fishtown Fest, like there's festivals everywhere. Manayunk, you can go down to, down in Baltimore, there's Artscape, which is like 500,000 people. You can go up to New York and do like all these events in Brooklyn. So I got a list of just every street festival. And that's how I really launched the brand. So I would just set up and sell. Some events you make money, some, you don't. Because obviously I have a little bit of a web background. I set up a website, but I set up on front page. There was nothing like what you have now. It was all manual. Every page I designed myself. The website took many, many years for it to even become like a factor in the brand. There was a site, but it was mostly, early on, it was mostly street festivals.
Wow. Now, those individuals that purchased those shirts at these festivals, how did you continue to engage them after the fact? Like, how were you able to bring them in?
So, my Facebook page has like 14,000 followers. And I would say like early on, about 6,000 of those are from way back in 2009. So, I would make these flyers. And on the flyers, I set up a Facebook page because Facebook was the only social media really out then. Twitter I wasn't even on Twitter, but Instagram didn't exist. So people would come to the booth, and if they bought something, I would give them like a 10% off discount if they would sign up and join the Facebook page right then and there. And so I had an iPad and people would kind of sign up, or they would take the flyers and join later on. So that was a good way of getting people to engage. Now, I wasn't turning those people into sales at all because I was not good at like the online side of it. So I was just collecting people onto Facebook. What's been great is some of those people, my most diehard customers, have been with the brand, and they met me and Duke at an event, 11 years ago. So it's been great for that, but that was it. The website, you would get a trickle of sales. So, I would maybe get 1 or 2 sales a week just from somebody that saw me at an event and then they didn't buy and then they went on the website and bought something.
Nice. Okay. So you're doing these festivals, you're selling the shirts. What allowed you to transition to actually go into a brick and mortar store? And where was that located in the city of Philadelphia?
So, I was doing the trunk shows, and again, just the way that I used to do things back then. I lived in Northern Liberties, and there was across the street from my apartment, I live on the second floor, directly across the street was an apartment, but Northern Liberties back in the day used to be retail, right? So all these apartments on the ground floor, back in the early 1900s or whatever, they were like little stores, and people would live above them. So the setup was like that. So I saw this apartment open up, and I moved out of my apartment and I moved in there. And the initial plan was the ground floor was going to be like my little office, and I would live upstairs. But as soon as I moved in, I had the idea, like, why not turn this into like a showroom? Like, I know that it's not necessarily legal, there's no zoning, but just have it, because when you walk by, it's just a big glass window. Gotcha. So you're into my living room. And I started out by just kind of setting it up to look like a store, but I was working out of there. By that point, I had like an intern, and then little by little on the weekends, there was a couple of brunch places down the street. There's an antique store next door, a framing shop, and then a really well-known cafe across the street. So on the weekends, there was a lot of just walking traffic. Okay. So I just opened the door, took a rack, put it right outside my apartment, and people would like kind of shop it, and they would peek their head in, and then slowly it was just like, it's a store, like it was not illegal. I completely transformed. Like, I ripped up the carpeting, put in hardwood floors, built racks, and then just turned it into a store. It was not legal at all. The city found out, and I got like crazy fine. Wow. But my landlord found out, a bunch of bloggers found out, because people would come in, and I got written up. Like a ton of just local blogs wrote about, like, like, oh, this guy's, it's crazy. Like, his apartment is the store. And obviously, because I had the bulldog, having a dog as a mascot, the greatest thing that I ever did, because he would just lay out on the sidewalk, and people would be walking by and be like, what is this dog doing out here? And be like, is this someone's apartment? There's a full-on retail store going on inside. So the press and my landlord combined, my landlord was like, this is amazing. Let's get you the zoning. Got the zoning stuff, went through that process. And then the press got a ton of people coming in. Like, it became a retail store. I called it a showroom. I lived upstairs. My kitchen was in the basement. Most days it would just smell like food in there, or like, but people would come in and shop. And so that was my first like little retail store. And based on the press I got, I did a Kickstarter, and that helped me kind of grow from there.
That was awesome. It's funny because that's how I found out about you. I actually read an article, I think it was online at the time, it was a few years ago, and it was talking about your brand, and it was talking about how you actually took your apartment and transformed it into a showroom. And I will say, I went into your Chestnut store, and your showroom was immaculate. I love the whole, the concept of kind of like a gentleman's lounge. Where you had, you had all of your products uniquely displayed. And so I think you really, amplified that type of, as far as marketing with that particular brand. So you did a great job with that.
Yeah, and that's what my living room, that's, what Chestnut Street looked like was just my living room, like on steroids. Like I turned my living room into like a gentleman's, like British gentleman's club, but it was small. So people would come in and they'd be like, what, some people would freak out because they were like, wait, am I in someone's house? But again, it was definitely unique. People remembered it even to this day. So,
think about it. And I don't know if you ever connected the two, but you mentioned Johnny Cupcakes. And when people go to stores, they think they're going into a bakery. Some people get upset. Some people are actually, but it's a lasting memory. So it's kind of like on that same type of, the comparison.
Absolutely. It's funny that, I think that even now I'm always trying to think about why I started the brand and what excites me about having a brand. And I think for me, it was always that like shock and awe and like getting a reaction out of customers and get something memorable. Having the dog as a face, like, there's so many brands out there, J. Crew, like all these high street brands. And for some reason, I'm not interested in just a brand, like, you know, selling clothes doesn't mean that much. It's the experience that you give people, you know, and starting out as a face-to-face brand, my perception of brands is so different than most people that are e-commerce. I mean, of course, you make a lot more money online, but I started it for that purpose, to like just make people freak out, you know.
And also technically you were building a community as well, face to face. You know,
Yep,
just like
exactly.
you mentioned, you have quite a few thousand individuals that are technically unofficial ambassadors of your brand,
Yeah,
because they've connected
absolutely.
so well with what you were able to do, and most importantly, the story that's behind that.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
I mean, Duke and Winston is like, there's certain customer groups that Duke and Winston is their whole life. You know, their kids, their grandparents, their dogs. It's like their family brand. And sometimes it freaks me out too, because I'm like, I know how I built it. Because, you know, if you've been around for 11 years, people really gravitate towards it. But sometimes it's like, wow, I've really, you know, I have this core of, you know, maybe it is a couple thousand people that like, they are die hard. I mean, people have the logo tattooed on their bodies. Like it's taken a life of its own, which to me is like great.
That's awesome. At your peak, how many employees did you have?
So with the retail side of it, you know, because at one point it was two full on retail stores. I've had 4 stores combined totally. So I believe there were about 15 people, part-time, you know, a couple of those were probably interns. So I'd probably say like maybe 10, full-time, only like 2 or 3. But, you know, a lot of part-time because the retail stores and all of that.
Gotcha. Now with, you know, I know you're a very, you know, you're big on creative, right? You have the business background, but you're more of a creative.
Yeah.
You already have that experience of managing 10 plus people, or was this something that was kind of like something you had to learn on the spot?
No experience at all. I'm not, even to this day, I'm not a manager of people. I'm a creative. The way that, you know, when it comes to people that I employed, you know, I think I've matured a little bit, but I was definitely more like try to be like a cool, friendly boss. You know, I don't, you know, because I'm such like a kind of wild thinking person, I don't like it if I hire people and I'm like trying to like put them in line. I want them to be wild, but for a good operation, you need somebody that's a little bit more structured. I have no structure, so it was a lot of learning. I think where I got really lucky was my first employee. She ended up being so good that she almost became like my operations person. And so everybody else that we hired from there, she was actually able to manage them, you know, so I was able to kind of relate a lot to her, and then she was able to do that. But it's, you know, this next phase of the brand, it's the same situation. You know, there needs to be an operations person, because I think that when it comes to creatives, I want to lead creatives, but when it comes to the other operational sides of things, you need somebody that's really analytical, that's really, you know, even just your shipping department, like there's so many little details that you need to be able to manage. And like, if you don't think like that, it's not even, it makes it impossible. I think, you know, Center City, that's really one of the problems was I was in charge of so many people, and it became a little bit overwhelming.
And you know what, it's good that you have that self-awareness about yourself, that you're a creative, but yet you're not a manager of people. And so therefore you delegated that to someone who was a manager of people. Richard Branson, who created the Virgin Group, for those that don't know, he was just that way. He was the visionary. He was the creative. He said one of the worst things for him was managing people and having to fire people. He just did not have that personality for that. And so he understood that. And so therefore he delegated that task to someone else. So it's just good that you noticed that about yourself.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, it can, you know, business is funny. And I think things are probably changing with business with the whole COVID thing, like people are understanding. But back in the day, there was all these rules of business, you know, like you can't be weak. Like if you're a boss or not, you have to be able to do this and manage other people. And it's like, no, you have to be able to, the number one skill set is, what am I bad at? And own it. Like, you have to be able to own it. Like, I'm not good at managing people. That doesn't mean that I'm any less of like a business person. It's just not a skill set I'm good at. Find somebody to handle that for you. That's you have to be able to admit that. If you can't admit that, you're just gonna, you're gonna mess up. So I think that nowadays you have to be able to kind of just identify things like that. And I think, like you said, with Richard Branson, I'm realizing that a lot. The best people, they delegate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Love that piece of advice that you just gave as well. Now, obviously you had a lot of highs, but then you also had a lot of lows as well, right? Mm-hmm. Why did you decide to shut down your operation a few years ago?
So, things were going really well. In the first store, there was maybe 4 of us, 8 of the small, store. I started picking up wholesale accounts also. So, I got picked up by Urban Outfitters. I was in like 200 in the country, 50 wholesale accounts, I'd say, outside of Urban also. So a lot of them were like specialty boutiques. I did a line of shirts for like all the beach towns on like in Massachusetts and the shore and stuff, and like nicer shore towns. So that picked up like a lot of wholesale business, in the summertime. And so it was great. I had the web business was growing, store, wholesale. And then I made the decision to move to Center City, because the store, which was my apartment, after a while, it just became not manageable. I mean, you couldn't fit 10 people in there, but imagine having 50 people on a Saturday, like trying to shop in your living room. It became too much. So, I found a space next to Boyd's in Center City. J. Crew was right down the street. It was on Chestnut Street. So it's like legit retail. It was about 2,500 square feet, where my apartment was probably like 300 square feet. So this is 10 times bigger. I think I'm exaggerating. My apartment was probably like 600 square feet. Oh, so it was 2,500 square feet, which most of that was office space, but it was like a prime location. The rent was high, but negotiated and got it down. Still high, $5,000 a month, as opposed to my apartment, which was $600, but that was my rent. So $5,000 a month. Now, what I didn't realize about real retail is all of the other costs, right? So like a space that big, 30 foot, 25, I think, foot ceilings. It was like that. The store in Center City used to be the home of, I think, like the guy that one of the first Phillies owners. So it was like a great stately mansion. I don't know, you were in there, right? So you saw like the way the ceilings were, like all the gilded, like, it was like it's a kind of a famous space. It has a name. I didn't know that it was kind of like a doomed retail spot. So it was really old. So all the infrastructure in the building is old. So to heat the place, to cool it, it's expensive. Security in Center City. In my apartment, there's no, you don't care. Nobody's going to steal anything. Right. But in Center City, the volume, I think on Chestnut Street, there are over 100,000 people that are walking up, every single day. So that is a lot of people. And so you're getting people coming in, all kinds of people coming in. You got some old lady that lives in Rittenhouse Square that looks like a nice old lady, but she's actually like robbing you. Like, she's like putting things in her purse. Like, so security, cameras, lighting becomes really important, how you light the product. So there was a lot. The first year was great. Revenues just tripled. Nice. Hired a bunch of people. In 2014, it was amazing. Then 2015, the cost of maintaining that space and, now 10 employees and, inventory. So, the amount of stock that you have to manage a space like that comes a lot. So decided to start buying. So we go to the trade shows and buy other brands so that we could fill the space up. It was just too big to fill with Duke and Winston product.
Gotcha.
So interpersonal situations with staff, spending, $50,000-$60,000 on inventory buys without really knowing, is this stuff going to sell or not? Because different decisions when it comes to that level of retail. Theft issues, infrastructure issues like ceiling caving in the wintertime when it snowed too much. Also, weather issues. If it snows a bunch of days, the city will, they will sweep the snow on the sidewalk, but people won't be able to maybe walk by your store, right? So like if you have 5 or 6 days where there's no traffic because of some like weather issue, it'll kill your business. So all of that started to kind of like just pile up. We made a decision to open up a second store, thinking like maybe that would kind of help. It was in Suburban Square in Ardmore on the main line. So opened that up. I was really, really hesitant to, I don't know, I just didn't focus on e-commerce. Again, I'm a people person. The website was growing just from natural sales, but there wasn't any effort like put on it. I just was really, really slow to adopt it. And so I think that was my biggest mistake. So the brand looked massive on the outside because it was like known internationally. A lot of tourists would come in, but the web business was not even close to like what it should have been. There was no, I think I only got my first mailing list going maybe in 2015, so all of these thousands of customers, there wasn't a way to get them to become online customers. So the stress of just dealing with all of that for really not, in the end, it's like, man, what's my profit? Like after I'm spending all of this, unfortunately there were a couple of like flash mobs in Center City and they just smashed all the windows and they would, and so I was just kind of like, and I lost the joy and that spark that I had when I first started the brand was gone. Like I would sit in the back office. The other thing too is I got a van and I got the logo on it, and I would drive up and down the East Coast and do about 200 trunk shows a year. This is like when I first started. Yep. That was gone. Like that brought me a lot of joy because I was in front of thousands of people. They're all loving the brand, walking by, even if they're not buying anything, you're sitting there and you're just watching people and you're seeing like trends and what they're wearing. And like a lot of that would inform what I would then create. So I would see a lot of these people with their dogs and I'm like, oh my, like I transitioned into more of like a dog brand as opposed to streetwear because I saw all of that. In the store, honestly, it just felt like I'm looking at just a pile of bills, right? And I have young staff. And I almost left my staff to run everything because I was just like, all I want to do is design and create. I had a lot of investor interest in the brand, but growing up, immigrant family, like you're just kind of raised not to trust people, and so all these people are coming in and lawyers and investors, and I just didn't know, like I didn't have anyone to back me, right? So no operations person, like, is this person going to take your business or not? So I turned down a lot of stuff. I did take on some money from friends and family, but in the end, it became not a good move because you've given out a ton of equity to just friends. So when you need something, like I need an accountant, I need a lawyer, it's like there's nobody in your team that's that. So you're just paying for all of it, So I was just, it's crazy for me to even think about now. Somebody as like, I don't know what the word is, like type A or whatever. I was just like dejected, man. Like I just didn't care, And I think the nail on the coffin was in September of 2015. The Pope was supposed to come to Philly, was coming to Philly. So it was marketed as the biggest like thing ever. So we just went crazy on inventory and stocked up both locations. And the way that they set up the city, all of the retailers, all the restaurants, like they were just kind of blocked off. Like it was not a retail event. So 2 million people descended on the city. I don't know what the exact number was, but it was not what we thought. Like they came for the Pope, and then like just the way that they diverted everything, they put these blocks up, people couldn't shop.
Wow.
So I was at the end of September, like just done, you know? And I realized that if I kept going, not that I was necessarily losing money, but I was not personally, like, you can't have a business if you're not interested in it, and
right.
You're not planning for the future and just every day. So I made a decision just to kind of like close things down. I mean, my lease was up, the rents were about to double, and I knew that if I signed that lease, it would not be good. So yeah, decided to kind of shut it down. Unfortunately, the web business, when I closed the stores, the web business just shot up.
Oh,
so
wow.
for the first 3 or 4 months in 2016, like my web sales, I was doing like $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 a month without spending a penny. But by that time, all of the retail issues and all of that caught up, and I just felt like I needed a reset. So, you know, I think May of 2016, just shut the website down, put a notice out like, you know, the brand will be back at some point. And then, you know, 3 years later, kind of came back to it.
I'm gonna be honest. I was a little, I was kind of upset, and I'm gonna be honest why I was, right? When I read your initial article on the magazine, I was so excited about what you were doing because it was something similar to what I wanted to do at that time, right?
Yeah.
And I was so inspired by you. And, you know, when you shut down the brand, because I remember going back to, I think it was your social media platform or it was the website where you basically said you shut it down, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, like that's it. It's done, you know? And,
Yeah.
But then I read this next article about you that you're revitalizing. And I said, that's what I'm talking about. You're the comeback king, brother. You got to come back.
Of course.
So, you know, so you let it sit for a few years, right? Dormant.
Yeah.
Were you, you know, moving on to other things at that time, just getting away from it? Or like, what was the process during that time? Like, what were you thinking?
No, I mean, listen, the brand was great. I mean, like, even by the time the brand shut down, revenue-wise, I was doubling revenue every year. So the way I explain this, the brand is as strong as a brand as you can get. Me personally, like, so my mistakes, everything that, and this is not me being hard on myself, it's just the brand shut down because I shut it down. Even at the height, there are things that I could have done. Operations, bring on the right people. You know, all those like fun little mistakes and the way I think about things, all of those things that they all add up without the structure, that it all adds up, and then you hit a wall because business is just too many things going on. So it wasn't like, oh, the brand is not great. It was like I wasn't great. So even when I shut it down, honestly, and this is crazy to say because at this point I'm like I'm like 30, early 30s. I had to go back to my parents' house. You know, they moved from Philly to outside of Boston. Okay. I closed everything down. I mean, I had tons of stuff, 2 stores, all these antiques that I used to decorate the store, inventory. I put everything in storage. I went up to my parents' house and I just lay in bed for like 6 months because I was like burnt out. Like I just was, you know, so there was no plan. Like I just couldn't, because what I couldn't understand was how could I have gone from being so much energy? Like I could sit till 3 in the morning and just develop like concepts and ideas. And then the last 6 months of the store, I let my, you know, 20-something-year-old staff do everything. I didn't want to take any meetings. I was just kind of like, so I was in a funk and I didn't understand like, you know, someone like me couldn't accept, like, depression is like, what is that? It didn't exist to me, you know? So I just didn't understand what it was. Like, I couldn't accept that I'd overworked myself and the brand was not going the direction that I wanted to. And I took it really, really hard. So, yeah, it was no plan. I just was at home, you know? And then, you know, obviously, you can imagine hundreds of people are reaching out like, where are you at? Like, what, you know? And so one day I think I woke up and I'm like, oh man, okay, I need to do something. I was at this point over the brand, done with it. But, you know, luckily because of everything I'd done, there's a brand in Boston, Kyle James Patrick. I went to go work for them. Just product development. Just they're much bigger brand than Duke and Winston, but only 3 or 4 people, and same issues. The founder is kind of trying to figure it out. It wasn't really a fit because again, I went in there being like mistakes, like because I know mistakes that I've made, so I'm trying to let them know. But you have to come to a lot of that stuff yourself. So I did that for a little bit, and then a good friend of mine out in LA was like, he had a bunch of stores in Philly. The Peter Pit, I don't know if you remember the Peter Pit.
Yep,
he had a Peter Pit in Chestnut Street, one at State College. Same issues, like they just grew, shut it down, and he just went out west and got himself back together. So he was like, come out here, live pretty much right on the beach in Redondo Beach and outside of LA. So I went out there, and again, no plan, not really working, just still kind of like bummed out. One of the toughest things for me was I would see Duke and Winston everywhere, especially in LA. A lot of bulldog owners and stuff, like I would see people wearing it, and I'd be like, I'd be so like bummed out. But I still wasn't mentally like sharp to be like relaunch it. I just, and I was also hesitant to go work for other people because so I had to suck it up, and it took a while. But out there, I started working for a couple of like more digital e-commerce brands, just again product development stuff. And then I really saw like, oh wow, there are kids. Things have changed. Like I think that I lost 5 years of my life, to be honest. Like Duke and Winston in a bubble, just working, especially on the retail side. Right. I wasn't aware that Instagram is a thing. I didn't know. Kids, Vine came and passed, but kids have YouTube. Kids are using social media, and they're killing it. And they have these merch lines. So while I'm killing myself over these stores with an amazing brand, these kids, especially in LA, they are like content like kings, like they develop content, they have merch, and they're making millions of dollars, right? And to be honest, they're selling a lot of garbage. Like they're just selling like China-made stuff, drop shipping is kind of a thing. And I was like, and the company I work for, we would do merchandise for every rapper, every little rapper, every, YouTube, Logan Paul, this and that. Like we were doing all this stuff. And I was like, oh, wow. Like with what I have, I should revisit this. And, just the one day, I can't even really say how it happened. Just the spark came again. It was like, all right, you can do this again, but this time, much, much smarter. And so that was probably 16 months ago. And I was just like, I'm gonna, take the steps to bring it back.
Wow. It was, if you look at it, right, that this, I think it's a quote by, I think it's Eric Thomas, one of the motivational speakers. That was a setback for a major comeback, right? Yeah. And I think you are the epitome of that. And the reason why I say that is, you burnt yourself out. You lost all your passion. I mean, honestly, like you worked yourself to the bone, to the point where you like, I don't even want to deal with this brand anymore. Yeah. But that rest that you absolutely needed, so that way you can explore what other brands are doing and find out what this new culture of, social media is all about, allowed you to pick up, learn from all of your previous mistakes, all of your successes, and now add this new component onto it in order to amplify it. So this second go round, I think you're going to blow it up because now you see the holes that you needed to fill.
Absolutely. And you know what? And also I'll say this, because this is really important. People don't think about this. When you're, I was a wild dude, like in my 20s, just, I see people doing it now, younger kids. You want to be the man. And so like, you think just working and like, I'll get Facebook memories from 10 years ago, and they're embarrassing because I'm announcing everything, going up to New York, grinding, hustling. Like, you're just, working, and I was so proud to work 20 hours a day, every day. I'd always be like, I'm working until 5 a.m. Like, if you are not mentally sharp and you don't take the time to like live a somewhat balanced life, you're gonna burn out. You know, that stuff didn't exist to me. And most 20-year-olds, it doesn't exist to them because they have a lot of energy. When I went out west, so I lived pretty much on the beach. I would wake up every day and I would surf every day, right? I learned how to surf. And there's like every single morning I would see dolphins in the water, you know, and being a guy that's lived almost all his life in Philly in a 6 square block radius, you know, the last 2 years of the business, I didn't leave Chestnut Street. You know, I actually stopped going to my apartment in Northern Liberties and I started sleeping in the store. Like the things went downhill that quick. And then when I went out west from being outside and just the sun and like, that's also brought me back. So some of it was self-care, I guess is the word for it. But you have to kind of take a step back, you know, and like really take care of yourself. And I think now that's the most important thing is I have to take things slower, like that go doesn't, you know, it's not really the way. It's like you take things slower, but you get a lot more done, especially now with all the tools that there are at your disposal. So you kind of have to take care of yourself, you know, and I think that's the main thing I learned, honestly, is like, if I'm mentally sharp and like just the same way that I was when I launched the brand, like keep my headspace is good, then everything else is kind of easy, you know?
Yeah, that's huge, because a lot of successful billionaires and entrepreneurs, I mean, they've mentioned that they have to get adequate sleep. They have to go to bed early and obviously wake up early, but they have to get their adequate sleep in order for them, like you mentioned, to be mentally sharp. I also believe that in a recent documentary by Bill Gates takes at least a week off just to think, where he's in solitude and he's reading these books, and then he's generating his thoughts and or ideas, so to speak, in order to, I guess, revolutionize whatever industry he intends on revolutionizing. So
Absolutely.
If these people can do it, I mean, obviously, who are we, you know, who are just now coming up for us to forego sleep, you know? So
Absolutely.
it's good that you mentioned that. You need to come out with a book, by the way, because I
know. I'm like trying to think of, you know, this is all new. Like I just relaunched. So this podcast is all of this stuff. I'm on the journey of coming back. Obviously, I relaunched kind of in the worst time in human history during COVID, but I'm learning a lot. And I think for me, it's better to learn, get the brand back in a solid place. Because I honestly, I think teaching, and I've been through a lot. I have a lot of information to give, but I also know that like, I want to make sure that I've actually followed through myself before I start like passing stuff on to other people. You know what I mean? Like I want to keep it legit.
Absolutely. So what's your 3 to 5 year plan now that you've revitalized the brand?
So, you know, the brand is still very early. You know, I just relaunched it in November. It's just me. I actually just made my first hire she's probably going to start on tomorrow. Tomorrow's Monday. Yeah, so it's going to start tomorrow. So it's still early stage. It's all online. So I'm still trying to figure out a lot. I think that my big thing is that I've learned that I'm not in operations at all. You know, like I care a lot about people. I've had to really go back and really think about what I care about. And it's honestly my mission that for starting the brand is actually even more important now, where COVID has kind of turned things digital. I'm seeing a lot of like unhappiness with people, you know, selling stuff to people just to sell product. Again, being in LA, everybody has a t-shirt brand, everybody has a clothing brand. Why am I doing it? You know what I mean? Like, why am I putting a logo on a shirt and selling to people? I'm really lucky because I have this dog following. I noticed from when I was doing all the street festivals, things that make people happy. People like to connect. Like, you know, you get a bunch of dog people together and it's like, they're happy, they're smiling, they're outside, they're interacting, all different races, all different types of people. I care about. So I'm trying to figure out over the next 3 to 5 years to really make the brand stand for that. It's a brand that connects people. Not just, now that, you know, the digital side, It's very different to me than when I had the retail stores. It's a lot more profitable, right, to be online, but the human interaction isn't there. So I'm trying to figure out how to, if digital is the future, how do you make people feel good other than just selling them stuff online and never seeing them? And there's ways to do that. Is there a way that you can replicate the retail experience, but it's not retail? Doing traveling trunk shows and kind of getting dog people kind of together. So, really the community side of the brand, my goal is to turn Duke & Winston into a very, very community-driven brand. Less so, the product is great, sell product, but the product is an afterthought of fulfilling the mission of the brand. There are a lot of dog rescues nationally that need money and trying to raise money. And I think Duke & Winston can be a good vehicle to help rescues. So that's a great mission, helping dogs find homes and using Duke & Winston to either collaborate with and partner up with rescues, or, just get the public involved in helping rescues out. So my mission is really stuff like that. The product is a byproduct of it. I know people will, what I know about brands is if you genuinely fulfill a mission, people love the consumer. It's sometimes I think it's too much, but it's just the truth of it. So if there's a brand that is doing something good and also has great product, people will buy, and so that's my goal, is to do that. And then, I think it's then slowly find people that believe in my mission, and can come on board. I don't want to hire a COO that just wants to be like, hey, let's get Duke & Winston into Macy's and Nordstrom. I'm not, I'm lucky now that I don't have to approach it that way. Somebody that sees my mission is like, I want to help you build this into a community brand. It might not be $100 million brand, but it's going to be a $10 million brand that is doing a lot of good and is like a brand that people die hard love. I'd rather do that as opposed to of course, $100 million brand would be great, but I would not work there. Once it got to a certain point, it wouldn't interest me anymore because it's not really fulfilling what I think is needed. So that's the plan, is how to figure out how to put the infrastructure together to get to that point. And mostly it's people. I gotta get a good team of 5, 6 people that really believe in the mission. And I think you can kind of build that brand out over the next 3 to 5 years, and then help other people do that. Other people have brands that, maybe everything that I'm learning about manufacturing and digital and all of that, kind of maybe build some kind of infrastructure to kind of help other brands, early stage brands do the same thing.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And much success to you, especially as you relaunch and as you start to venture into different pathways, so to speak, in order to build that up to its multi-million-dollar status.
Thank you.
What books are you currently reading, or what books have you read that have brought a lot of value to you?
So a couple of friends have been recommending books to read. My first stage of the brand, I wasn't reading much, but now, COVID is changing a lot for brands, right? So you really need to understand why you're doing what you're doing, who your customers are, the product that you're making, why are you making it? A lot's changing with manufacturing and stuff, and the brands that will survive, I think, really create stuff that the customers really, really, really they really want, as opposed to just pumping out. When I first launched Duke & Winston, I thought I'd be the next Ralph Lauren. Ralph Lauren has 1,000 different SKUs. The product doesn't really seem that important, right? Because it's just everything. So looking at things this way, some of the books that I've been recommended, and these are the best books that I've read so far, is, one is called Talking to Humans. And these are just types of books that help you figure out ways to kind of see what your customers want. Survey your customers, ask them what it is that they would like to see, and always building things that solve some kind of issue in their life. Like, with Duke and Winston, I'm less interested in just making t-shirts and like, okay, what is it that like a dog person and their dog, like, what do they need? Like, is there some kind of product that would solve something? If you can hit on that, it's, you know what I mean? Like, it's, and you actually develop something, it's lights out, as opposed to just constantly making t-shirts and tote bags and whatever. So that's a good book. Another book is called The Lean Product Playbook. Again, amazing book, just gives kind of breaks down like how to really hone in on the types of products that your customers would want. Another one is Inspired. And I can, for your podcast, I can always send you a list of like the names of the books. And then this is called Traction, which I think is a really famous book.
It is.
It's how any startup can achieve explosive customer growth. And it just helps you break down all the different, it's a little bit dated, I guess, but you can still follow along. It's just all the different avenues that you can reach your customers, digital, grassroots marketing, like all of that. And then it helps you kind of break down all of your ideas that you have, and then pick which avenues you can use to reach customers better. This is probably actually the best one that I've read, because I'm just following it step by step, and it's helping me a lot. A lot of my crazy brand ideas, it's helped me kind of figure out how to transition. Like, I did something where I had like 300 bulldogs like run around Philadelphia like 5 years ago, and it got me a bunch of press, right? Got me on like Fox and all of that. How do I transition crazy stuff like that to like digital, that still gets the same reaction, where I'm not spending money on press? Like, I can still do these campaigns that like really get everyone's attention. And Traction is actually a really good book to help me figure out how to transition from like, being much more of a face-to-face person and taking all of that stuff digital. So.
Oh, that's awesome. So explain, a lot of successful high performers have morning routines. Do you by any chance have a morning routine? And if you do, what is it?
No, I mean, I'm still trying to get better at like the waking up early and stuff. So, the thing for me is I'm in Dallas now. I came out here because I found a kind of a full service manufacturer. It was actually for a client for a brand that I was working for in LA, but then I came out here. It was supposed to be temporary, but I ended up just staying because a lot of the resources from manufacturing and stuff, like Texas is like the Wild West, to be honest. It's like there's a lot of resources here and there's a lot more space. Where Philly, it was getting really hard to just find people. I like to make as much stuff locally as I can. So the thing about Dallas though is the weather is pretty good year round, and there's a lot of outdoor stuff. So back home, you wake up and it's like you have to drive to go to a state park or something. Well, like here, my next door neighbor has got horses and sheep and whatever, and like I'm in the city. So being outdoors really helps, in the morning, getting outdoors, taking the dog out, going for a run. Before I gained like 40 pounds, like when I closed the store, I was in bad shape. And, I've lost, all of that. And, I'm running 5-6 miles, a couple of times a week, where I couldn't even do a quarter mile when I started. I mean, I was in bad shape, wow. And so that complete outdoor lifestyle, casual drinking and all that stuff that everyone does. I haven't had a drink in a year, and just because I just don't, there's no need. And so my energy level, right, is as sharp as it's ever been because of that stuff. So I would say that's probably the only routine. I'm still trying to work on the waking up early side. A lot of my creativity comes at night, unfortunately. So I'm not the biggest morning person, but I would say just being outside as much as possible and getting sunlight, is a big routine for me.
Gotcha. And that's awesome. And you know what? You bring up a good point though, honestly. Not everyone is a morning person and not everyone operates the same, right? So you have individuals that can wake up at 4:30, 5 o'clock, and they just start getting things done. And then you have the night owls like yourself, that, you know, your creativity, you know, your thoughts are it's like a caged monkey, and, you know, toward the end of the night, and you have to get it all down on paper, and you have to operate that way. So not everyone's built the same. So you sleeping in the, you know, during the morning, if it makes you productive and allows you to be as successful as you can be at night, then you know, not every one shoe fit, you know, not every one size fits all, so to speak.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, not at all. I mean, you know, I you know, diagnosed with extremely bad ADD, like as possible, you know, the worst as it can get. And I find that in the daytime, there's a lot going on, and, you know, it helps me be creative. If I see this, I'm going to look at it. I'm going to research it. Like, I'm just, you know, and so it helps. It's creative, but I cannot focus to get things done.
Right.
I tend to notice, and it seems like it's almost like biological. Like, at the end of the day, when other people are kind of like settling in, like things slow down at night, my brain just kind of clicks and comes together, you know. And I'm working on it. You know, back in the day, I'd probably work till 3, 4 in the morning. Now I'll probably only work till like 11. You know, so it's like from like 6 p.m. till 11 is like my best time, and I'm still up at 8:30. But like, you know, there's this thing where get up at 5 and get up at it doesn't work for me. You know,
it's not going to work for everyone. Yeah, and I've started to realize that as well. You have an individual. I think the last book I just read was by James Prince. He was one of the big hip hop moguls in the industry. He multi-millionaire, what have you.
Yeah, I know Prince. Yeah.
So
Houston based.
Yeah. He says that, and you're in Texas too. So obviously, he said that he wakes up when his body wakes him up, pretty much.
Exactly.
You know? So people just have different routines, but they still can be successful no matter what the routine can be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the digital world has changed a lot, man. Like, a lot of these old rules, I think it's like, you know, it's not the same. Like, you know, when I was in Philly and I had 2 stores and I had, you know, you got to be up at 6 because there's all of these things. Digital, of course, the business world still runs 9 to 5. So if you need to communicate with people, but if you're young and you're just starting out and you have a brand, like you can, as long as you're productive in the times where you actually are working, you can shift things around, like, you know, following all of these set rules. It doesn't really mean much. Like, the whole thing, if your body feels set to wake up at like 9 a.m. and you know you're going to be productive, of course. If you force yourself to wake up at 5, but then you're not really doing much, you're groggy for the 2 hours, it's pointless. You know, sleep a couple more hours.
Right, that makes sense. So how can people connect with you if they want to connect with the brand, they want to connect with you personally? How would they be able to connect with you?
So the website is duke-winston.com. You can just Google Duke and Winston. You know, you can find the brand on Facebook at Duke and Winston, Instagram at Duke. There's a Twitter, which is just kind of, you know, reposts from Instagram, but that's also at Duke and Winston. You know, you can email me, my first name, SEUN at duke-winston.com. You know, I'm on LinkedIn. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay. Shane, let me tell you, I am very appreciative just to have you on this podcast episode today. I think you brought a lot of lessons, a lot of ideas, especially to the general audience. I think your story is just incredible. You know, you weren't afraid to share your entire journey. You know, you're not just talking about your successes, you also talked about your failures as well.
Of course, yeah.
And it was something that I know a lot of people that will be listening or watching, I know that they'll get a lot out of, especially if they plan on starting these brands. So I really appreciate you. I hope that you continue the brand. I wish you nothing but success in the near future.
Thank you very much.
That you're doing. Yep.
Thank you, man.
Not a problem. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Another episode of the Doscinco Project is in the books. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. Give it a 5-star rating as well as a review. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram at xdoscincox. That's a wrap, you guys. Thank you for tuning in.